Hello and welcome to this 6-week Catherine of Siena course, Women in the Catholic Church, Contexts and Cultures. In this second part of the session, we consider issues of experience, interpretation, language and meaning. And I'm going to suggest that the best way to approach the materials in this course is to think in terms of women as storytellers. What theological insights can we gain from listening to women's stories? What has been omitted from the historical record, from religious doctrine and from our understanding of what it means to be human by the exclusion, censorship or trivialisation of women's stories? I've given you on this slide an extract from Meaty to the book Visions and Vocations, and it's called Women's Cultures, Women's Callings. So you can read that quotation on the slide and let's just think about it and talk through it. Pope John Paul II in 1995 wrote a remarkable letter on the occasion of the Fourth World Conference on Women in Beijing. In that letter, he observed that women have often been relegated to the margins of society and even reduced to servitude. And he went on to say, if objective blame, especially in particular historical contexts, has belonged to not just a few members of the Church, for this I am truly sorry. That's quite a remarkable apology to women for what the Church has failed to remember and record and acknowledge of women's contributions to society. Pope John Paul II went on to acknowledge that while women have contributed as much as men to human history, very little of women's achievements in history can be registered by the science of history. And he says, but even though time may have buried the documentary evidence of those achievements, their beneficent influence can be felt as a force which has shaped the lives of successive generations right up to our own. So in other words, it's difficult to find a full and equal record of all that women have contributed to the shaping of societies and cultures and religions over the course of human development. But that's not to say women are lacking from that story. It's just that it's much more difficult to find their interpretations and stories which have not been preserved with the same authority and diligence as those of men. Now, of course, many men's stories are also missing from the record. Poor people generally have not been part of the historical record. So in retrieving these marginalised and forgotten voices, we also have to look beyond gender to other factors that lead to the exclusion of people on the grounds of race, religion, culture, economics, from what counts as history. But when we focus on women's histories, women around the world are beginning to realise that the cultural and vocational resources available to them haven't emerged from the acquired wisdom of women themselves. In other words, it's difficult to find resources which can help women to look back and piece together the story of women's development, wisdom and insights over time. It's often said that men learn more by standing on the shoulders of giants. In other words, each generation of learned men draws on what previous generations have contributed to knowledge and understanding, but women, it's sometimes said, have to start in every generation at ground level all over again. What women have access to are all too often masculine projections that cast the female in a shadowy realm of subordinate otherness, closed off from access to much that's essential for human freedom and flourishing. We might think even today of statistics which show that globally girls have far less access to education than boys, and across the world in positions of institutional authority, influence and significance, women are still underrepresented at all levels of society. So you might like to pause here and reflect on how much your own cultural and historical tradition has retained of women's stories, achievements and influences. What role models, historical figures and legendary or fictional characters inspire your tradition, religion or culture? How many of these role models are women? What changes might come about if women's experiences and contributions to the making of history were given equal weight to those of men.